So recently, in September 2025, there was an interesting study done on over 1,000 Greek-speaking participants from Greece and Cyprus, and the researchers wanted to look at the question, why are so many people single today? Side note, I often find that researchers' theories on this are often quite different from what the average person thinks, so let me know what you think down in the comments. Why do you think so many people are single today? Their hypothesis was that one reason why a lot of people are single today is because they struggle to maintain intimate relationships. And these researchers took an evolutionary psychology mindset to this. They talked about what's called the mismatch problem in evolutionary psychology, which is the idea that back in ancestral environments, men could keep mates through coercion or force, but not so much in modern times. And so in modern times, they sort of lack the skills actually needed to keep a mate. Things like conflict resolution, emotion regulation, empathic attunement, so on and so forth. So I'm going to go into exactly what this study said. Spoiler alert, they did find evidence for their hypothesis, and honestly, it made sense to me. I do think that relationship maintenance skills are an issue. And in the past, people didn't really need to know those skills because there were things larger than them sort of keeping them in relationships. Things like societal pressure, judgment if they wanted to break up, financial constraints, sometimes even fear of violence. So I think some of the relationships that are ending, it's probably a good thing that they're ending. A relationship ending isn't always a moral failure. In some cases, it's the healthiest outcome. But on the other hand, I do see this gap with a lot of people that they don't really have the skills required to maintain a healthy relationship long term. And I do think that might be part of the reason why some people end up single. Now, obviously, look, there's nothing wrong with being single. Some people want to be single. Some people don't want a partner, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people don't value their family as much. Some people don't value friends as much. Some people just don't value having a romantic partner, and that's perfectly fine. As long as you have at least a handful of people that you can go to in times of need, it doesn't matter what exactly those types of relationships are. But voluntary singlehood is just one type of singlehood. There are also people who are involuntarily single and people who are between relationships who would like to not be single. And the researchers talk about those different types. For people who want to be in a relationship and sort of struggle to make that happen, it's important for us to know what might the barriers be so that they can find the connection that they want. So let me break down this article for you, explain what the researchers think is going on with single people, and also what might be missing from the study. Let's get started. So the findings of the study were that people who experienced greater difficulty maintaining intimate relationships were more likely to be either between relationship single or voluntarily single than have a partner. For women specifically, there was a curvy linear relationship. Women were most single at moderate amounts of difficulties maintaining relationships, and it sort of tapered off at very high amounts of difficulty, which the researchers had no explanation for, and honestly, I don't really either. I don't quite understand why a woman who has extreme amounts of difficulty maintaining a relationship would be less likely to be single than a woman who has moderate difficulty. Whereas for men, it was a linear relationship, which is more like what you would expect, meaning the more difficulty they had maintaining an intimate relationship, the more single they were. The researchers said, in particular, individuals who struggle to maintain intimate relationships are likely to experience relationship failure frequently, thus increasing their likelihood of being between relationship singles compared to those who do not face such difficulties. So they talk about this notion that, if you struggle to maintain a relationship, you might end up in a relationship and then another one and then another one. And after repeated failures, you might at some point decide to become voluntarily single because it's I'm over this, I don't want to try dating anymore. They also found that women who face difficulties maintaining intimate relationships may also have an increased likelihood of involuntary singlehood, which was not true of men. Their explanation was, for women, difficulties in attracting intimate partners may overlap with difficulties in maintaining relationships. So in other words, women who struggle to maintain relationships also struggle to attract partners, and sometimes that can lead to them being involuntarily single. I wonder if the reason why this wasn't true of men as much is because women tend to be relationally more involved. There is this stereotype that is often true, that women tend to be the ones kind of bringing people together even when they're in relationships. Women tend to have friends even when they're in a relationship, whereas men not as much, rely more on just their partner. So if a woman struggles to maintain relationships, maybe that's more likely to make her involuntarily single because of that. Now, what are the real life implications of this article? I struggled when thinking about this because these researchers' findings, they do support a correlation, but it's not necessarily evidence of the causal mechanism they theorized is at play. The findings show people with difficulties maintaining intimate relationships do indeed have a higher likelihood of being single, not that difficulties maintaining intimate relationships cause them to be single necessarily. Correlation does sometimes suggest causation, but there's a lot more research that needs to be done in order to determine if that's the case here, such as tracking people longitudinally. Because it could be maybe instead of people are single because they struggle to maintain relationships, maybe they struggle to maintain relationships because they're single, or maybe there's a third construct at play, such as, attachment style. However, if we go by the researchers' theory that there is a causal link between the two of them, and I do suspect this is true because it's something that I've just personally observed in my life, that people do struggle with relationship maintenance skills in their life. Here are the implications of that. You're probably not single because you're just unattractive as a partner or you haven't found the right person. Rather, you might have just never been taught certain relationship maintenance skills, such as conflict management, learning to disagree with people constructively rather than destructively in a way that leaves you stronger than before rather than pushes you apart. Or emotion regulation, not shutting down or lashing out when you're feeling overwhelmed. Or consistency, keeping things strong even after the initial excitement has worn off. Or empathic attunement, meaning observing what your partner might be thinking and feeling and trying to be sensitive to that. Or repairing ruptures, like knowing how to reconnect with someone after a moment of hurt. Or tolerating discomfort, like having a hard conversation that you don't want to have, or not always getting your way 100%. Or attachment security, learning to rely on someone else without running away or without swallowing them whole. And by the way, if you ever feel like, well, I don't have any of these skills, what do? I do have an entire course dedicated to this. It's over 4 hours long. It really combines basically all of the skills I could think of to make relationships work. But the point is, you probably have more control over your being single than you like to admit. And listen, I think it's a very seductive notion to tell yourself, I'm single just because of this thing I can't control. I'm single because I'm just ugly. I'm just not a chat or whatever it is. Because if you tell yourself that, then you don't have to actually put in any work to grow as a person or to improve yourself. Whereas if you tell yourself, hey, there might be certain things that I can actually do to affect my outcomes, to find the connection that I seek, then you have to actually put in the work day by day. But if the findings of the study are true, it's not even so much about how to get a person, it's about how to keep them. Now, if you're single and you lack relationship maintenance skills, that's something that probably shows up in other types of relationships too. Ask yourself, have you been pushing away family members over, not necessarily out of irreconcilable differences, but maybe just because you're not sure how to move forward from a rupture? Do you struggle to keep long-term friends? Do you find yourself often either drifting away from people or having ugly fallouts with people? Lean into what goes wrong in all the different types of your relationships. When did the issue start cropping up? Was it at a specific point in the relationship? What were the common reasons and patterns that took place? What was your contribution to them if you're being honest? Wherever the going got tough, that's where the skill is that you could learn. So for example, if 6 months into a relationship, after the initial excitement has worn off, that's when you start to notice yourself pushing people away. That's feedback. That's a point where you can work on that. And I think the study also brings up a tough question for people to ask themselves if they feel like they're voluntarily single. Do you not actually want a relationship, or do you feel like you're too busy or you don't want that at this point in your life? Or did you just give up trying? Because if it's the latter, there might be things you can do, skills you can learn to make relationships easier for you and more long-lasting. So be really honest with yourself. If you genuinely do not want a partner, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you ask yourself this question and you find, you know what, I do kind of deep down still want a partner, I just feel like it's not feasible for me. Explore that a little further. Now, there were some other limitations of the study. It was a self-report. The findings haven't yet been replicated across cultures. There could be other things at play that are not accounted for by evolutionary theory. And again, that just like bizarre finding about the curvy linear relationship for women specifically. Is there something weird happening maybe with this particular set of participants that's causing this, or is there some explanation for that research hasn't yet thought of? Let me know your theories down below. What did you think of this study? I hope you have a nice rest of your week and take care.